In this video, we are going to talk about how do we determine the sample size needed in order to estimate a proportion. Right, so last time we looked at how do we construct confidence intervals. We've taken a sample, how do we construct a confidence interval based on that sample? This time we're going to change the question a little bit. We haven't taken a sample yet. Our goal is to ultimately get to a confidence interval. We're not going to do that here, but we're going to say, how many people do we need to sample in order to have the information, in order to be able to construct the confidence interval that has a certain margin of error, right? So we may determine ahead of time the desired margin of error, and if that is known, we can determine how large the sample should be before we go about obtaining it. We use the following formula. So our formula that we use is n equals, so the critical z value with an area of alpha over 2 to the right squared, times p hat times q hat. So those are estimates for the proportion of the population that would believe something, and then the complement, 1 minus p hat, would be what q hat is. So those are estimates if we have them, and then divided by this margin of error. Again, that's a margin of error that we have determined beforehand. So we can use this to calculate, this is the sample size we will need. So if we have an estimate for p hat, that's what we use. If we don't have an estimate for p hat, you can use the estimate 0.5, 0.5, or you can say we have no estimate, and so p hat times q hat is 0.25. That's going to come from making an estimate of 0.25. That's kind of the worst case scenario. It makes n the largest relative to a desired margin of error. All right. So we can do this in StatDisk. So how do we use StatDisk to do this? So in StatDisk, we are going to select analysis, sample size determination, and then estimating a proportion, right? So we're trying to determine a sample size, so we choose that sample size determination. We need to input 3 different things here. And so those 3 different things that we will need to input are the confidence level. We will need to input the margin of error, and we are inputting this as a decimal. And we will input an estimate of p, the estimate for that proportion, the proportion of the population. All right, so let's roll through an example. A news organization is planning on collecting data to determine the percent of voters that voted in favor of Proposition A. How many people do they need to poll in order to be 99% confident that the sample percentage is within 3 percentage points? Whew, so there's a lot to that question. Let's break that question down a little. All right, so how do I know what we're doing here? Well, let's read it piece by piece. So we want to know how many. We're trying to determine how many. We need to find a sample size, right? That's what clues me into we're finding a sample size. So we need to know how many in order to be 99% confident. Our confidence level is going to be 0.99. That the sample percentage is within 3 percentage points. So within 3 percentage points, that's telling us that our margin of error is 3%. But when we go to StatDisk with this, we need to write this as a decimal. So we want to be within 0.03. Now, do we have an estimate for the value of p? No, we don't have an estimate. Here in this problem, that's not given to us. All right, so let's go to StatDisk. We are going to use this information and see what we come up with. All right, so over in StatDisk, here we are. Let's choose analysis. We are trying to determine a sample size, so we choose that. And we're trying to determine a sample size so we can estimate a proportion. For our sample, the confidence level is 99%. Our margin of error is 3%. We write that as a decimal, so 0.03, that's right. We do not have an estimate of p, so we don't have to plug anything in there. You could also plug 0.5 in there. Those two things will do exactly the same work. So I can leave it blank though. And it tells us our required sample size is 1,844. Notice down here at the bottom, over here in this box, it tells us that this did assume a proportion of 0.5, right? So I said we could have plugged in 0.5 there. That's what they did when we don't plug anything in there. Right? So 1,844, that is our required sample size. So here we're not going to actually construct the confidence interval because we haven't even taken the sample yet. We're just trying to figure out how many people are we going to need to sample. Part 2 of this question says, previous data suggests that 40% are in favor of proposition A. How many people do they need to poll in this case in order to be 99% confident that the sample percentage is within 3 percentage points? Right, so our confidence level is still the same. Our margin of error is still the same. The thing that's different is now we have a guess for P, right? We think the proportion is like 40%. So we think the proportion is 40%. So we're going to use that information in StatDisk this time. So again, I would choose analysis, sample size determination. We're estimating a proportion. Our confidence level is a 99% confidence level. Our margin of error is 3%. And our estimate for the proportion is 0.40, is 40%. So we will evaluate that. And this gives us an answer of 1770. So 1,770 people. And that is how we can determine sample size. All right, in the next video, we are going to go through a similar kind of process with confidence intervals and determining sample sizes. Only this time we're going to try to estimate means. We'll have a couple different methods to come up with a confidence interval depending on what information we have. But I will see you in our next video. I'll talk to you guys later.